I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Board of Finance to order, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm not sure whether that'd be easier or harder if we were all on camera, but thank you. Our primary mission tonight is to advance the budget process. Amy has provided the Board of Finance and others with our packets, and there's been a lot of great dialogue and cooperation as always. I think what I was alluding to earlier is present today, that the world continues to change dramatically every day, every hour. And so I think as we go through where we are today and where we hope to end up, we recognize that the world continues to change, and we're trying to adapt with it as it goes. So in terms of the where we are with the fiscal year budget, the state of play is that we've had our meetings, we've gone back and forth with both boards, not so much with the Board of Ed, but with the Board of Selectmen. And we have a approved budget from both the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen that reflects requests that we made in this dialogue. I think where I sit as chairman of the Board of Finance, and as we will discuss as a board tonight, is that we are very concerned about the financial impact of this COVID crisis on the town and on our taxpayers and on those who have been impacted, not just by the disease, but in another very dramatic way, which is by changes in employment and income. So to that end, I'm going to ask Amy to go through where we are with the adjustments that were made at the Board of Selectmen, so that we can have a basis to show where we are in terms of what that budget would be. So the base assumptions, are they going to be able to see this on the camera?
They should be able to.
Okay. So the base assumptions for the budget for the Board of Finance, based on the Board of Ed budget that had the main driver here tonight we're going to talk about, along with a couple of other things, is the assumption we use for the pension rate. And we've gone back and forth. I think as a board, we were strongly in favor of moving the interest rate assumption for the pension down from 6.75. But upon further reflection and the economy, I think it's appropriate for us to defer that reduction in the interest rate assumption until next year, so that we don't need to burden the taxpayers with that added expense. I know that will still be a topic for discussion going forward. It was something we felt very strongly about doing, but I think in light of the economic impact on our taxpayers and on the town, that deferring that reduction would be very appropriate this year. So the assumption that was in the Board of Ed budget was at 6.75, using the previously established unchanged mortality rates. The assumption that the Board of Selectmen originally submitted was at 6.625, but when they went back at their last meeting, they changed that assumption back to the same 6.75 rate that we had last year, again with the same older mortality rates. There were changes made by the Board of Selectmen that included removing the open space project, realigning how some of the major capital accounts were paid by using bonding for some of the larger projects. There were a couple projects that were taken out of the list that will be paid for out of excess revenues in the 2020 year that we're in. And all of those adjustments reduced the operating budgets appropriately. And so when you take all of that into account, the budget on a combined basis would result in a 37.17 mill rate plus the 1.2 for the fire district, or a 15 basis point reduction in the mill rate, which equates to $33 savings for the median home. It's not a lot of money, but I think it's important that we have a direction that's there. So that would be the original result of the last dialogue that we had. I think in consideration of that proposal by the Board of Finance that we go back to the 675 rate, and the fact that there are significant job losses in town, that it would be appropriate to go back and ask the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen to have, in essence, a freezing on hiring and reduce the full-time equivalency by one for each board. And so that would be for the Board of Ed, the equivalent of the person for the Keystone project, and for the Board of Selectmen, it would be for the Parks and Rec position. So I've done a lot of talking now. I would ask for comments from the Board of Finance members, and if you jump in, I'll make sure everybody gets a chance. Don't be shy.
I'll go, Rob.
All right.
Rob, I'll go.
All right.
First of all, thank you for that summary, and Amy, thank you for being in there tonight, and to SCTV for filming. I'm very grateful to the three of you for making tonight possible. I agree with Rob's assessment. The Board of Education, we don't have line item authority, which you referenced, and so we leave it to the Board of Education to decide which position, or it's not a position, the dollar amount that you want to reduce. It might be in materials or something else. But the idea there was to go in with a no-frills budget this year, because our residents were seeing decreased income, we're seeing decreased employment, overall hardship for many families, and just being responsive to that. And as the world changes, we can adjust our assumptions going forward. But I think an important point that, Rob, you mentioned is that we're not abandoning the reduction of the investment assumption, but postponing it, and that's going to come roaring back at some point, so that we're adequately funding the promises we've made to our unions. And so I want our unions to know that we're committed to funding those appropriately. But it is what's happened most recently, what's going to impact next year, is our annually required contribution will increase because our investments have so plummeted. So to the extent we're making reductions this year, I did want to make the point that this is not a one-year phenomenon. It's not going to be a one-year recovery. This is going to take many years to recover. So it's the beginning of some hardships that are coming down the road. That's actually Rob's recommendations. Thank you.
This is Derek. I just, I think that's a point really well taken. We're actually, particularly for people on fixed incomes, we're seeing the Fed take action to reduce interest rates. We're actually moving in an opposite direction if we're staying still. So I think that's a very important point, that it's a deferral. But I thought that it was very thoughtful. I think it's the right thing to do, and optically very important to show a decrease as minimal as it may be, to the mill rate.
Thank you.
This is Linda. I'll chime in. I'm also supportive of the direction we're moving in, but would just echo the comments that have already been made that, changing the pension assumptions and bonding for stuff that was previously not to be in the bonding didn't really cut much. Only the two positions that you mentioned, Rob, are cuts, along with a little bit in capital, the open space, and the comp study. And I think, I just want to be real clear that next year we do need to make those pension assumptions. We need to act on changing them, and I won't be happy if people come from either board with, okay, well, how about if we only go halfway? Like, that can't happen. We have to actually really do this. We should be doing it now. We can't. I understand that, but we really have to make that whole move happen next year. I don't know if this is on the agenda for later, but you did mention about the $2.2 million for the open space also was taken out of the budget, but it sort of sounds to me like, Rob, do you want me to comment on this now, or is this going to come up later?
Go ahead, that's fine.
I'm just very concerned about the notion that this is being referred to all the land use committees as though it's something we're going to act on later and throw into a November referendum. That is not something that I will approve. We have a huge amount of capital spending lurking out on the horizon for stuff that's urgent and needed. There are capital projects that the public has wanted for a long time that haven't been done, like the senior center. There's all of the school stuff. I mean, for us to even contemplate bonding through a referendum for millions of dollars for a project that was never on the capital plan, especially at this point in time, but given all sorts of other reasons like that, we have tons of open space in this town. We need growth in our grand list. Our Parks and Recreation Department already doesn't have enough staff. Why would you add more work to them? Et cetera, et cetera. I could go on. So I just want to give people a heads up that I personally would rather not see that project even go forward to the land use commissions, because when it comes back to us, I'm going to be a very strong no.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, and Linda, I think I appreciate your comments. I think it's appropriate in the context of the timeline that we're going to be talking about tonight. I would prefer not to speak to the merits of that project, but I do completely agree with you that merely taking it out of this year's budget, or the potential for the referendum in June, in no way implies any analysis or recommendation that we would expect to just do it later. So it's out of this budget and referendum, and it will have to stand on its own merits when it comes before our board.
This is Kevin. I would agree with both Rob and Linda about the open space. I just feel that taking additional open space and or adding additional open space adds a greater burden to us. I think when we've talked about adding projects in the past, I'd be curious as to what the operating cost of adding the additional land would be too. So I won't go too far into the open space, but I also agree with the interest rate assumption, adjusting it. But I do feel it's a priority for us to get it down to a reasonable level.
And this is Art. I just got a couple of points. One is the big picture that there were a lot of worthy projects this year that add to the quality of life in Simsbury that were reasonably tailored that we've taken out, and I think that's good. I think we have to be responsive to the realities that Rob and Lisa both outlined, and so good. We're down. There will actually be a tax decrease. It's not a big one, but I think that's exactly what we should be doing right now. Secondly, I'm a little uncomfortable that occasionally, I haven't heard it in this conversation directly tonight, but there is the presumption amongst a lot that we have a rough year, and then things pick up and go back to normal, and that does not appear to be the case. That next year's budget is going to be put forward probably in a situation of very serious duress, and so my inclination is not to get into the weeds, to let selectmen and education get into the weeds and meet the goals that we set, but I am worried about baking in that 6.5. We're going to have to that's going to be a bigger burden next year. And next year is going to be a rough year. So,
Right.
Okay, you said that's what you want to do, but we want to make it very clear that in doing so, we are making next year's finances, which are going to be in a very extremely difficult climate, even worse. And so I really am not comfortable with that one. And I guess my last would simply be that on the bigger picture of all the large things we saw when, Rob, you said we were starting the year and everything else, through no fault of their own, the Board of Education came up with, has been working on this long-range plan. And I can't think of a worse juxtaposition of a long-range plan meant to address serious issues, which is the responsible thing to do, and what has just happened. So that is not explicitly on our agenda tonight, but for me, that's one of the elephants in the room, is that where we move forward and taking care of our schools is also going to be a very heavy lift in the years to come. Those are my thoughts, Rob.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's completely true. And yet we all, I think, feel it's appropriate, given where we sit here on April 7th, that we do the right thing for now. I completely agree with you, Art. This is not a V-shaped recovery. There will be a long tail to this. Discussions of rebounds on the virus and other impacts are, pretty prevalent. So, and the 6.5 or 6 3/4, wherever we are, we need to honor our commitment, as Lisa says, to the people that we've made this promise to. So we'll have to deal with that in real time next year. Whether we get all the way there or not, I agree with you, Art. We can't say it has to be baked in, because we're going to be facing some very, very tough challenges. I guess at this point, anybody else from the Board of Finance have a comment before I ask a couple of the others to respond? So I guess I'll start with Matt Curtis. You guys did a great job coming in with the budget we wanted. We appreciate that. Your team was very thoughtful in all of that. But again, I think we would just appreciate the ability to have the Board of Ed's significant budget help a little bit here as we try to just make additional cuts in the mill rate.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Rob, and I would just say we have a meeting set up for next week, and we will take this conversation to the Board of Ed in terms of the best way to come up with that reduction. That's a position we put in to respond to a state mandate, so whether we try to fund it somewhere else or reduce that position or reduce other dollars, we will get to work on that and completely understand the context of what we're talking about here.
I appreciate that. And I guess I'll ask Eric, but I will say to Tom Taberski, Tom, it's not like we didn't hear what you had to say. We understand how much there is a need for this position. It just feels like with so many people being laid off, including town employees at the library and other places, that having a new employee just seems inappropriate at this time. So that's either for Eric or Tom to speak to, I guess, or Sean, either one, however.
This is Eric. I'll jump in. This is a position that we feel in the long term is needed to continue to steward the parks that we have and continue to upkeep the assets that we have. Having said that, in the current climate, Rob, I completely understand the input from the Board of Finance, and I think it's reasonable in the current context.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, Robin, this is Sean. I agree with everything that your board members have all said. I think you guys are looking at this exactly the right way and appreciate the thoughtfulness of what you're going through this. So I'm in agreement as well.
Great.
Hi, Rob. This is Tom. I can't say I'm happy about it, but I understand where the board is coming from at this time.
Great. We understand the need, believe me. And Maria?
Yes, I mean, I would agree. I mean, given the climate, it's challenging to, bring on new people. Just in terms of our overall strategy, really with any expenditures in the upcoming year, we'll be monitoring revenues. We're going to be monitoring cash flow. And then, depending on how that looks, if we need to, delay hiring, staff members when we have retirements, et cetera. I mean, we'll be watching our expenditures very carefully, particularly discretionary spending. But again, monitoring our cash flow to help, manage the financial crisis that may come.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And there've been a lot of work going on behind the scenes by everybody. I want to thank Amy and Maria, Matt and his team too for helping. But there are the known knowns and the unknown knowns and the unknown knowns. So we're as we go through, we don't know where. We thought we might have some savings, and then there's another executive order, and that changes that. We think that the golf course is going to be closed, and it looks like they're getting pretty good play today. So we just don't know where we're going to end up, but we need to be as careful as we can going into it, and there will be changes along the way. I think we all recognize that. So if we make those last two adjustments, then Amy is going to put up what I think we would recommend as the Board of Finance budget. This would then need to go back and be ultimately approved by both the Board of Selectmen. No,
it's your budget now.
Okay. So this would be the budget that we would refer to the public hearing and then ultimately to a referendum. We'll speak to the timeline in just a minute and whether we're going to actually have a referendum or not. But that would end up with a mill of 3709 plus 1.2, so that's a 23 basis point reduction, $50. Again, in the right direction, and I think it's much more than just optics. It's showing that we're being thoughtful about employment and thinking about the taxpayers. And then so that would be the proposal that we would make for the Board of Finance to vote on that budget, to refer it to the public hearing. Is there any more discussion that we'd like to have among the Board of Finance members?
This is Linda. I just want to ask a clarifying question.
Sure.
What we forward, I just think I'd want to be clear, it may not be the final budget, simply because as things keep changing just in the paper the other day, or maybe yesterday, there was some reference to the state and federal government trying to do more to give towns and cities some financial relief. So it's possible the picture could even get better. It's also certainly possible that the picture could get worse, and I think we just need to be a little careful to reserve the ability to make any changes that are needed between now and whenever we have a final budget.
Yeah, it's a very good point. So it actually probably makes sense to go through the timeline and how this actually gets to the point where we would actually approve the either by referendum or by authority granted to the Board of Finance by the Board of Selectmen, the actual budget and set the mill rate. But so the steps would be that if we can do it tonight, we would refer this budget to the public hearing. That public hearing would be held on April 21st. It would be a virtual meeting like this. There would be public comment that could be submitted beforehand by email. And all of those comments will be read into the record. I'm really looking forward to that. But no, I seriously, that will be the process. We'll have a system where we can take email questions or additional comments live during the meeting. It will be on SCTV. The exact protocol for that, we're still working on. The result of the public hearing then would, after that public hearing, we would have the option to close the public hearing? No? We have?
So, in your packet, the Board of Selectmen voted to extend the budget process by
Right.
30 days.
Okay.
And in your packet is a sample timeline of where each topic takes place. So for the public hearing, you can have it on April 21st, or you can have it on May 7th. If you have it on April 21st, you also have to have it on May 7th due to the timeline listed in the charter. So if you want to have it on April 21st, you can make any changes that you see fit, if anything's happened over the last couple weeks, and then you can forward it on to May 7th, and then whatever happens on May 7th, you can close your public hearing.
So at that time, when we close the public hearing, the Board of Finance, all right, so here's the difficulty. The rules around whether or not we have to have a referendum have a timeline or a sunset. The executive order expires on May 28th, I believe. That's in here somewhere. It's highly likely that will get extended. I don't think that we're going to find ourselves in the next 60 days wanting to have a public referendum. In that case, the executive order allows the Board of Selectmen to designate the budget-making authority, which in our town is the Board of Finance, to set the budget, which we would then do on what day?
I would have to probably, Maria, or Melissa, actually, do you know what date they would have to have the Board of Selectmen give the authority to the Board of Finance based on their meeting schedule?
Sure, this is Maria. So the resolution that they passed last night, which is a more comprehensive resolution, does give the Board of Finance that ability to adopt the budget if we are unable to hold a budget referendum open to the public. So you do now have that authority that has been granted to you. I would say that if you do need to do that, perhaps that June 1st date, that would be a good meeting to adopt a budget and set the mill rate.
And June 1st is a Monday. And that would give us.
Correct.
Yeah, and that would give us time then to get the tax bills printed and distributed.
Yep.
So, yeah, I won't complicate it by saying what happens if we do have a referendum. It's outlined in the memo that Amy referenced, the memorandum. It would be held on a Saturday, May 30th, if that happens. I think that's highly unlikely.
So what's the advantage?
I'm sorry, so Linda, just let me finish and then you ask your question. So this gives us an opportunity to look at the budget again on the 7th.
The 21st and the 7th, yes.
On the 21st and the 7th. And then we have one last look at it before we set the mill rate. Right? Based on no referendum.
Right.
If it goes to referendum, we'll have one last time to look at it before we refer it to referendum.
Right. Which
That
would be on
would
the
be
7th.
in the late May timeframe.
No, that would
May
be.
18th,
No.
May 14th.
May 14th. That's, yes, May 14th.
Yes.
So now, Linda, I interrupted you.
No problem. It's not clear to me why, what are the advantages or disadvantages of having two meetings versus one for the public hearing. You know, we can do April 21st and May 7th, or just May 7th is what I'm understanding. So why have it twice?
Correct.
Rather than just one?
So that is a good question. If for any reason the public hearing had to be continued, can somebody give me a good example of why it might need to be continued?
Feedback from Matt's
Something
board.
dramatic happens the day before the hearing,
Sure.
all right? Or there's, we have a meeting that starts at 6 and is still going at 2 in the morning. If you need to continue it, if you've started that meeting on the 7th, then you've run out of time. That's the last day you can do it. Is that true, Melissa?
That's correct. Yes.
Couldn't that still be true? I mean, I don't mind the extra meeting. I'm just not sure that there's much value in having it twice. I mean, you can have the calamity still happen on May 7th, and all of a sudden.
It's completely true.
Issues.
That's completely true.
Yeah.
Rob, I'm inclined to keep it, and then we can cancel it if we get closer to that time and we don't need it, but keep it on the books.
You're talking about the continuation. So if we meet on the 21st, we have the public hearing on
Correct.
the 21st. And then we determine we don't need the public hearing on the 7th.
You can't do that.
We can't do
Oh,
that.
we
We
can do
have to
that.
have
Okay.
that.
Then you have to have the referendum no later than May 22nd based on the charter timeframe.
Right.
All right. But we can't have the referendum on May 22nd because that's inside the executive order date. This is the conundrum.
Mm-hmm.
So then we could go ahead and set the budget before the 28th, because now I'm confusing everything.
You're confusing me.
Huh?
You're confusing me.
We had town council look at this. I'm inclined to stay on the 21st and then have a brief meeting on the 7th. That's what we've done before.
Yeah, that's fine.
It seems redundant, but
Meeting on 21st of April and 7th of May.
yeah, the 21st is a public hearing.
Yep.
Well, they're both public
They're
hearings.
both public hearings,
Yeah.
yeah.
But what's happened in the past when we did this, Art, was that the second meeting, the second public hearing, there was very little public input. We closed the public hearing, and at that point, we finalized the budget and sent it to referendum. In this case, we would finalize the budget and approve it, right?
But on the 21st, you could approve it, but then you have to continue the public hearing to the 7th. So more of the public would have an opportunity to bring in their comments.
And on May 7th, we would finalize the budget and set the mill rate?
No. Well, it depends. So it would, theoretically, you would send it to referendum if there is one. And if not, then I guess under the executive order, correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa or Maria, can they do it that night?
I would want to wait, actually, for as long as possible, just for more information.
What Bob advised was we follow the charter as closely as possible, so I think we'd still want to publish the budget ahead of time before you have that meeting where you actually approve it, just to give the public an opportunity as they normally would before the referendum.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go on the assumption that this is going to be an issue for every town in the state of Connecticut, and they're going to put the executive order date out to June 30th, so that there will not be a referendum. but then we'll have our timeline. I think it's highly likely.
Rob,
Go ahead, Lisa.
I just had a question, and it can wait. On the substance of the budget, I had just one question for Amy on revenues before we move on to dates, and we can come back to it later. Just let me know when you want me to post that.
Well, we got onto the dates because we were trying to understand what we were doing tonight. So let's continue. I'll take your question on the budget itself.
Amy, at the Board of Selectmen meeting last night, per executive order of the governor, the Board of Selectmen adopted two measures of relief for residents, which will have an impact. I believe it's insignificant enough that we don't need to adjust the revenues, but I do want to confirm that for the record. Can you just walk us through that?
Yeah, so this was actually part of my finance director's report, but I'll just jump into it quick. The Board of Selectmen did approve two property tax relief programs last night. So there is the property tax deferral program, and then there's the low interest rate program. The deferral program allows tax, sewer, I forget what the other ones are offhand, but those are the ones that impact us, to defer those payments up to 90 days if there's at least a 20% reduction in household income. Residents would have to fill out an application and be approved for it. And then the other program that they approved was a low interest rate program. So this allows late payments that have an interest rate applied at 3% per year. This is a reduction from the current 18% per year from the period of July through September. There's no application required, and it applies to all residents. So I ran some cash flow analysis and did the financial impact related to these two programs. So combined, there would probably be like a maximum of a loss of about $90,000, which is minimal in nature. I don't think you'd
So
have
no
to,
budget adjustments necessary?
I don't think it's necessary, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, any other questions or comments relative to the budget? And I apologize for sort of the murkiness of the timeline, but I think we do need to deal with the first step of that, which is to refer this budget to the public hearing.
All right, so can you just, or if you guys are all in agreement on April 21st, can somebody make a motion to approve the public hearing for April 21st and set that date?
So
This
moved.
is Linda, I'll move that.
So Linda will
I'll
move it,
second that.
and Lisa will second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? None.
Okay.
All right. Do we need to set the May 7th date or not?
No.
Okay.
And just so you know, I'm sorry, if you wanted to keep a Tuesday for that continuation, you could do May 5th or 6th of that week. That would be fine too. Just, you have that option.
Okay. All right, just be on the call when we have the April 21st, Melissa, so you can tell us what we do next.
Yeah, it's our charter queen.
I don't turn around without her telling me
Our
it's
charter
okay.
queen.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I appreciate everybody's help with that.
All right, now you can go on to the referral.
All right, so that's this.
Yes, I can't see it, but I think so. Does it
So
say
the action
referral?
we need to take tonight is to move effective April 7th, 2020, to adopt the budget process timeline? That's not it.
No, it's the
sorry.
one after that. It says referral of Board of Selectmen, Board of Ed, and capital budgets to public hearing.
Okay.
There you go.
So we need someone to move effective April 7th, 2020, to refer the fiscal 2021 Board of Education, Board of Selectmen, and capital budgets as presented to public hearing, as presented, to a public hearing pursuant to Section 808 of the Town Charter. Hearing to be held Tuesday, April 21st, 2020, at 6 p.m., Main Meeting Room, Town Hall. So I need a,
Point of order, Rob.
yeah,
Are we going to make the adjustments of the reductions included? As presented, don't include the reductions. So could we amend that motion to include the reductions?
the
The position, 90,000 and 90,000.
as amended?
By the Board of
Okay,
Finance.
yes.
Thanks. I'll move that,
All
Lisa.
right. In a
Yeah,
second?
Linda, and I'll second it.
Linda seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. So moved. So I'll just, I'll mention this is in the submission, but as a reminder, due to current governor's executive order, the public hearing will be closed to the public. That's an oxymoron. The public hearing will be closed to the public. However, the public hearing will be aired live, television, and online. Residents will have the ability to submit public comment in writing, which will be read into the record of the public hearing. We have already received some public comment, and so if people are watching and waiting to hear their comments, those will be read into the record on April 21st. We encourage all taxpayers to be informed and comment and question the budget process, and we look forward to that on April 21st. All right? Is that where we are?
Yep.
So I think we completely understand the total budget process timeline. I don't think there are any questions about that, are there?
Clear as mud.
Yeah, clear as mud. I think we can plan on those 2 days as of right now. If we need to move the May 7th date, we will. And we'll look for clarity on whether we think there actually is a need to have a separate timeline for the referendum or not. And we will send that to everybody so that they can see it as it develops. All right? That leads us to the Finance Director's report.
Yep. So just an updated listing of grants and donations in your packet. And then under the defined contribution and deferred compensation pension plans, the RFQ update, FIA did present the vendors that responded to the RFQ. And then our group narrowed that down to 3 vendors. And we're currently in the process of setting up interviews with each of those vendors. So more to come on that. The open space acquisition, the Board of Finance had asked the Board of Selectmen if that could be removed from the plan and put into a possible referendum for November. And then there was just like a follow-up question asking what the process would be if this were to happen. So if this is something that the Board of Selectmen wants to move forward, they would put together a request for a supplemental appropriation. The Board of Finance would approve the supplemental appropriation, and then the Board of Selectmen would be able to set the date for referendum for the open space acquisition. And then I already went through the 2 tax relief programs offered to residents that were approved last night. And that's all I have.
Amy, do you have any idea how much we collect in taxes on the land, the Griffin land now?
I do not offhand, but I can find out and send it to you.
Thank you.
Amy, I had a question in terms of Rob mentioned the layoffs at the library. Has anyone else been laid off, or are there any plans to lay off town employees at this point?
Not that I'm aware of, but Maria can speak better to that.
Sure, not at this point. At this point in time, we have done a temporary layoff for about 15 very part-time employees at the library, averaging about 8 to 9 hours per week. Those are individuals that have public contact work. I'm so sorry. My 5-year-old decided to say hi. I'm so sorry. 1 second. Charlotte, honey, mommy is on a phone call. sorry, everyone. I'm sorry.
Perfectly all right.
1 second. Yeah, working from home is tough with a 5-year-old. Sorry about that. And so as I was saying, those individuals had public contact work. So, for example, library pages, we weren't able to find work for them. At this point in time, those are the only employees that have received a temporary layoff notice. We have been able to find alternate work for folks, including some work from home arrangements. At this point in time, there are no additional plans to lay off staff. However, this is evolving daily. Sometimes, our situation changes hour by hour. So I can't say definitively that there wouldn't be additional temporary layoffs, but at this point in time, there are none planned.
Didn't the governor issue some sort of prohibition on laying off? I know teachers, but I thought also at least full-time town employees. What can you sort of clarify what that governor's edict was?
Sure. So my understanding of that is that I believe it was paraprofessional staff, cafeteria workers, and bus drivers for boards of education. But Amy and Matt, maybe you guys could elaborate on that.
No, that's my understanding. So it's staff that you would need to get up and running again should your operation reopen. So we've maintained our staff. We've assigned them roles in our distance learning right now and don't plan to have any layoffs at this point. And we're in negotiations with Salters, just looking forward if we should close for the year.
So there isn't a similar rule for the employees of the non-education part of the town?
Correct.
Okay.
As with our businesses, though, we're encouraging them not to lay off. Everyone's trying not to lay off, so we appreciate any efforts you guys are taking. We know this is a hard time as we evaluate this and try and keep that in mind. But thank you for your efforts.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Has the town ever contemplated an alternative to layoffs of furloughing people if need be, so that they, maybe take 3 or 4 days a week that they're not being paid, but at least they are staying on their benefits? I know that was something that we did at the state when I was there. And it was a way to keep people connected to their employment. They could still get unemployment benefits, but they didn't lose their health insurance, which at this moment in time is a pretty critically important thing to have. So just a thought.
Yeah, sure, Linda. So again, the current employees who are on the temporary layoff, since they only average about 8 to 9 hours per week,
Right.
those individuals aren't benefits eligible.
Right.
If we were to consider furloughs, most of our workforce is unionized, and that is something that is a mandatory subject of bargaining under MIRA. So it is a possibility to consider in the future, given circumstances, but that is something that we would need to negotiate with the unions about.
Right. Okay.
All right. Any other questions or comments? We have.
This is Derek. Just real quick. Matt. I know nobody has a crystal ball, Matt, but we have basically April 20th on the BOE website that's says will be closed until then. I mean, I can't imagine that kids will be back to school this year. Or do you have any thoughts on that?
Derek, this is Susan. I'm not sure if Matt's still with us.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this. We have a call with the commissioner on the 10th, and we're expecting more direction at that point in time. So we should have a better feel for that after that call. But, looking at what's going on around us, I'm not optimistic. I would love to see us at least come back for a couple weeks in June, but I'm just not optimistic right now.
The governor has also pontificated about that it would be unlikely that schools would go back. I mean, I know in some of the stuff I've read of his, he's seemed to be indicating. I wish they would just come out and say it so people could plan, but rather than doing it in sort of 2 and 3 week increments. But especially given that the latest stuff is talking about how the peak is looking like it's going to be later in May, then I think Susan's right. It's not looking very optimistic.
Susan, have you guys thought about summer school? Is that something you're contemplating or thinking there will be a need for?
So I was in a meeting this morning with the curriculum team, and we're doing a lot of good work in this phase 2, although it's just beginning this week, and it'll kind of hit its stride after the break for the high school kids. But what we're really not thinking about summer work at this point. I think we'll have to use the summer maybe to make up some special ed situations, and really look to use September as a whole month of review and making sure everybody's where they need to be. And stepping up our game a little bit in September as we try to get the kids where we hope to accomplish as much as we can through the distance learning, but use September as a support to make sure they're hitting their stride.
Amy, for you, how much is in the non-lapsing fund in case there's a need there?
Anticipated at the end of this fiscal year is $175,000.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? We do need to approve the minutes from the March 17th meeting. Just comment to Karen, as always, a great job. Lots and lots of detail in this one, which was good. I usually like,
Thank you.
Yeah, I usually like less is more, but I thought it was really appropriate that we captured a lot of the discussion that has helped us get to where we are today, and I really do appreciate all of the interaction we had at that meeting and how well you captured it. So, if I don't hear any major objections, I move that we adopt the minutes as submitted.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Before we adjourn, I just want to thank everybody, as always, for the very cooperative and flexible way in which we go about this process. It's never easy. We've had a few hard ones. I think Sean said the other day he's been doing 8 or 9 of these, and they don't get easier, they get harder. This will be one we'll remember. But I do appreciate it, and let's keep that attitude as we go forward and be ready and flexible to adapt if we need to. So on that, I'll adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Rob, thank you for showing up.
Yeah, I'm here. We're good. Amy, too. Amy had further to come.
Amy as well. Thank you.
All right, that'll conclude our meeting. Thank you very much.
All righty.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Everyone.